Legacy Sabbath School, and we're just delighted that you're here today. Just want to make an announcement. Next week, our speaker will be our Norwegian friend, Dr. Tonstedt. So I know that there are many who are very familiar with Dr. Tonstedt, and we're glad that he can be here. So that's next week here at the Roy Branson Legacy Sabbath School. Now, I know you're all aware of the issues up here in Paradise, California, and I'm going to turn this over to Laura here. She has a few comments to make on that.
One of my former faculty is up there at the hospital. Her husband is the CFO. And they've reported that 80% of the town has been destroyed. All of our Adventist clinics, last I heard, are fine and functioning. Part of the hospital has been destroyed, part is fine. And they do have a place if you want to help with this. They have already raised almost 1.4 million, including some matching funds. Adventist Health has committed more than 30 million to make sure that people have benefits of pay while the hospital is not functioning. And these guys were very heroic. They evacuated patients, in some cases in their personal cars, because the ambulances couldn't get close enough to stage. One of the men, when he pulled in to make sure that his tires were okay, said, "Your tires are fine, but all the plastic in the back of the car has melted and will need to be replaced because of the fires." If you wish to donate, if you go to www.adventisthealth.org, anything you want to give would be helpful. I mean, if all of us in here gave $20, you know, and we spread the word. This is on LinkedIn for those of you who may want to go looking for it. So please, in addition to prayers, consider helping out with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Okay, we are continuing our series today, but we're saving the best for last. We've appreciated Dr. Daniel Kido, and today we're going to have another Dr. Kido, and it's Elisa. And can you just come up here, Elisa? I want people to know you. I understand you're Hawaiian. You've lived in Hawaii or born in Hawaii?
I was born in Hawaii.
Okay.
But I'm really Korean, but I've been to Korea once. Hawaii is my home.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you moved to California.
Should I turn this
Yeah, why
on?
not? Yeah, there you go. And I understand that you were not an Adventist when you came to California, but somehow you had family members that were.
I wasn't an Adventist until I went to Pacific Union College and was baptized my junior year.
Okay. And I understand you had I got some of this information from the other Dr. Kido, said that you had a scholarship to UCLA, but turned that down and went to PUC instead.
Yes, and may I tell you why?
Please.
The summer before my freshman year in college, my aunt, who is the only aunt I have who is an Adventist, invited me up to San Jose to be a kind of a part-time receptionist for her. She didn't need a receptionist, but she wanted her eldest brother's children to maybe find out about God. So she was starting with me since I was the eldest. So I went up that summer, and on Sabbath, I had nothing to do. So when she invited me to church, I said, why not, right? But it was at that time that I met a wonderful group of young people. And prior to this, all of my experience had been in public schools. And I'll tell you, I had never met a group of young people like those young people. And they were from Mountain View Academy, Mount MBA, Lodi, from all over. And they were the key reason why at the end of the summer, we didn't want to separate. And they said, well, you can go to PUC with us. And I said, you know, it's August, and I have my room. I was going to be in the first co-ed dorm at UCLA. My parents weren't too keen about that. But, and I had the scholarship. And my dad had 6 kids, no college education. So you can imagine it was a big decision. But I knew that those young people that I met that summer had something that I wanted. I didn't know what it was. I just knew in my 17-year-old immature mind that it was something I wanted. And so I went with them to PUC, and hence I'm here today.
And then you ended up with another person that you had met at a camp meeting, and you've been married
54 years.
54 years.
But it wasn't camp meeting.
Oh.
It was general conference.
Oh, general conference.
In San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yes.
Okay, so, and he's been a very lucky man, it sounds like, here. So.
Yeah, but now, you know, at the time that we met, I hadn't been baptized yet, so it was a little risky. He was taking a chance on me, you know.
But it seemed to have worked out.
Yes, it has. For 54 years, it surely has.
Well, that's good. Now, I understand you got your doctorate at Boston University.
Correct.
And you taught at Atlantic Union College
Yeah.
as well. And was, did I already say it was English, your degree?
Yeah, my degree is in English, and English education.
Okay,
So I don't know what I'm doing here with research,
yeah.
you
Well,
know.
all I say to English professors is, ain't that something? But anyway, and then you, from there, followed to the snowy place in a place called Rochester. And,
Well, prior to that, we were in Boston,
Boston,
and
yeah,
then
well,
Rochester.
And then
Yeah.
you were there, at that time, I think you went on the board of Atlantic Union College.
Yes,
And then you followed your husband down to St. Louis.
correct.
And did you become on the board of Union College? Is that?
Yes. Now, how'd you get all that in?
Oh, man, I bumped him.
Okay.
Anyway, the reason I want to make this as personal, you know, that who you are. We've appreciated your husband, and I know we'll appreciate you. And you came last year to finish up your, well, you're just still working on it, so.
Yeah, but you were right to finish up my career.
Okay.
I wanted to work in an Adventist higher ed institution, and I'm going to be very personal here. I wanted to work with Larry Garrity,
Okay.
and he was president of La Sierra at the time.
Now, was he president of Atlantic Union? When you
Atlantic Union when I was on the board, yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, as Elisa, it's like Melissa without the M.
Correct.
And Elisa, it's yours, and I'll give you a signal when go for
Okay.
questions. I'm taking a little more time, so just be at ease and
Okay.
turn it over
Thank
to you.
I maybe will move out of
Yeah.
this slide here. So thank you for being here, as you usually are. But there are some people who are not normally here, and they're probably the youngest people. And it's Eva and Elijah Oyoyo. And their dad is sitting back there, Udo Oyoyo, and the mother is sitting up here, Esther. So I'm pretty sure that Elijah and Eva are probably the youngest attendees of this Sabbath school class. But it's nice to have them here because they're friends, and we've been friends for a long time. I knew Elijah when he was a little baby, right? Well, not baby, toddler maybe. Their father, Udo Oyoyo, sitting back there, has been very critical in the research that I have been doing and will continue to do. And he's here at Loma Linda also in research in statistics and research design and all kinds of things that have to do with research. So anyway, I'm happy to have them here. Of course, my husband, and what can I say? You know him fairly well, I think, but he has also been part of the team for the research the future research, or the research that just started this fall. But let me begin with my beginning slide, and that is to ask you, how many of you have seen this PBS documentary? May I see your hands? Oh, very sad. Very, 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 very sad. Now, this was made for television, a PBS documentary. It was shown on PBS for at least 3 years. It's been picked up last year by the Hope Channel because our contract, that is, PBS said 2 years and then we wanted a third year because it's been doing so well. And I forgot how many millions of people have seen this already?
Probably about 30 million.
About 30 million plus. More non-Adventists than Adventists have seen this film. And it was made by Martin Doppelmayr. Now, some of you know his name. How many of you know his name? All right, you know Martin. You know that Martin is not an Adventist, right? You might think he is, because when he and I are emailing back and forth on Friday afternoon, he'll say to me, "Have a happy Sabbath." But he comes from the Catholic faith tradition. But you wouldn't know it if you were to talk to him. You'd think he was an Adventist, right? So anyway, he made this film, but I think you maybe saw this one last year. He came out with, who's seen this one? Well, maybe about the same number that have seen the blueprint. So I'm not feeling quite so bad. But An American Conscience, Reinhold Niebuhr, okay? And as a preview, for those of you who are not on his mailing list, this is coming out February 2019, the Howard Thurman story. So big civil rights guy, mentor to Martin Luther King, okay? So I'm looking forward to seeing that. All right, so back to, and here's a nice photo of him, for those of you who don't know him. What was that? Did I hear something? Let me tell you how we first met. We met over the phone. One day in my office, I don't know if it was morning or evening, you know, they said, hey, you have a phone call from this guy. This guy was Martin Doppelmayr. We had never met. I didn't know anything about him because at the time, the films that he'd made on Adventist, the Adventist, some of you have seen that, right? Correct. Hadn't come out yet. So he introduced himself over the phone and he said, say, I've read an article about Adventist K-12 education in the Christian Science Monitor. And then I saw a follow-up blurb in the Los Angeles Times. He said, I want to talk to you about this because I've been learning about the Adventist health system. I'm making this video. And he said, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think you could have a place like Loma Linda and the other colleges that you have without the strong K-12 system that your church has. And of course, I agreed with him. So he said, let's talk more. And we did. And he said, and he used these words, I'm quoting him. He said, this is an extraordinary network. It's an extraordinary story. And someone needs to tell it. And I said, oh, great. He said, I'm willing to tell it if you will supply me the information I need. So because it's PBS, it's independent, you know, I couldn't say to him, well, go to Loma Linda and then go to Spencerville Academy back east. I couldn't say, put these schools in the film. But what I could do was give him a list of schools to scout. So we gave him the list. It wasn't just my choice, but, you know, a sort of a collective thing. So he went out scouting, and I held my breath the whole time. Because I said, well, you know, you people are spoiled, I think, because not every place, most places don't look like Loma Linda Academy. Maybe some of you know of some of the other places out there. But I knew that our real estate, our curb appeal in most places was not that great. And I knew that inside, never mind the outside, inside, we didn't have up-to-date science labs, right? All of that stuff. We didn't have a lot of technology. But we gave him the list nonetheless. I held my breath, and he came back and he said, the first thing he said to me was, Elisa, you have real stars out there. And I said, what do you mean, Martin, stars? He said, I have never seen a group of teachers and principals as dedicated to the development of education in every kid that's in their classroom. And so from then on, it was a joke with us that we have real stars out there. But what was it? Why did he feel that he could make a film about Adventist education? And he called it The Blueprint. Now, a bunch of us were not so certain about the word the blueprint. You know, it has some pluses and minuses. But he's the filmmaker, right? So he said no after he'd studied the blueprint from Ellen White's, okay? Went to the GC, went to the Ellen White archives, studied about it. He says, no, it's got to be the blueprint. So we said, well, you're the filmmaker. All right, so, but he couldn't make a film just on feel-good stories. And believe you me, we have many feel-good stories. We have lots of feel-good stories. He had to have some data. We're all driven nowadays, you know, by data. We do our shopping by data. We're very informed consumers. And I would like us to think, that is the Adventist education system, that we make data-driven decisions. But he had to have the data, and he knew we had the data. That was the reason for his first phone call to me, and this was the data. It was the Cognitive Genesis Project. And I happen to be the project director, the principal investigator of this study. It was a population study of the entire North American division. That is every school in the North American division, US, Canada, Bermuda. Every school, every kid, every parent, every teacher, every principal. So it was population, it was not selective, and it was not random. Now, you won't see that all of the numbers may not, you might say, well, back there, didn't we have more than 52,000 students? We surely did. In the original database, it was more like 72, 73. But we had to toss out some kids because everything didn't line up. Maybe the parent didn't turn in the survey. Maybe they missed one day of testing, etc. Everything had to line up for them to be in this database. But in the end, we had 52. And then, mind you, I can say it now, but I say it in all humility. It was a Herculean feat to get the parents of the participating students to give us data. I'm telling you, if it hadn't been for my student workers working with me in the office, we could never have gotten this. And also, credit to the principals out there, you know, waiting at the parking lot to grab this parent who hadn't yet given us their survey, okay? Hiding in the bushes, whatever, they did it. And then the teachers and principals at the participating schools. Okay, so now some of you who have seen the blueprint know the results. But I'm going to say that most of you probably do not know the results of this longitudinal study, 2006-2009, conducted independently. No money from GC, NAD, nowhere like that, okay? These were independent donors giving essentially me the money to conduct this study. Okay, so are you ready for the results? Keep in mind these numbers now. Students in Adventist schools outperform the national average on standardized tests. Now, you think a minute, well, try to expand your vision of what an Adventist school is. But think for a moment the diversity we have, okay, in our Adventist schools. You're going to think Loma Linda, and I don't fault you for doing that, but I'm thinking South Dakota. I'm thinking Timbuktu in Texas. Are you with me? Okay, we have a huge diversity, not just ethnically, but socioeconomically. A big diversity. And look what happened. When you put them all in a big pot and stirred it around, this is what happened. Okay, they outperformed the national average on standardized tests in all subjects and for all grades. Now, you know, I know this is a sophisticated audience. We have a lot of people here who have advanced degrees. But I'm telling you, when I'm out in the churches and I present this data, I hear amens and hallelujahs. I hear amens and hallelujahs. It's incredible that it should be in all subjects and in all grades. And let me pause for one subject, and that is science. Some people doubt that we can teach science well in our schools. And why? Because we emphasize that God is the creator of everything. The topic of creation goes throughout all the subjects. And so they say, hey, you can't teach science very well if you're believing that, God's a creator. Well, science was one of our higher scores, and guess, within the subtest of the general science test, scientific inquiry was the highest. So our kids are, inquiring. They have inquiring minds. Okay, even though you didn't say hallelujah, amen. I see a couple of smiles encouraging me to go on, Elisa. It's all right. Maybe later on. Okay, now, this is something that we did not expect. We, meaning the group of researchers, and I had 2 statisticians on this project at that time. It was not Udo, he was too young. Not really, but okay. They scored above their predicted or expected achievement. All right, so I'm going to explain it this way to you. If Joey's ability is here, and we know it because we tested it on a standardized instrument, okay? And we hope, all of us would hope, teacher, parents, principal, school district, that if this is his ability, that his achievement would be right here, right? All right, in our schools, take a look at this. Joey's ability is here, but his achievement is here. He scores above his predicted achievement based on his ability on a standardized testing, cognitive ability. This happened now, I don't know, I don't get tired of all of the alls here. All subjects, all grades, for all school sizes, regardless of ability level. So if you separate ability level into 4 quartiles, the lower 2 quartiles, okay, the 25 and the 50, those students did the same thing. So they scored above their achievement in all subjects, all grades, for all school sizes, regardless of ability. I know you're saying a silent amen to that, and a hallelujah. Or you might be saying, that's impossible, how did she get that? But, what can I say? Okay, so now, what about school size? Yes, we have schools like Loma Linda, and Redlands, and La Sierra, where I am, but there were small differences between smaller and larger schools in both achievement and ability. However, when there were differences, they were consistently in favor of the smaller schools. And, who said that? Thank you very much. All right. Yes?
What percentile did the schools relative to the rest of the nation?
Excuse me?
What percentile did they place at?
What's the delta? What's the difference?
Oh, for the schools. I don't have that at my fingertips, so I can't give that to you. But I'm going to say all the small schools educators were thrilled about this because in the North American division, 60% of our schools are small. What is small? 3 teachers or fewer. Okay, 3 teachers or fewer. And I know in U.S. culture we are all, not all, but a lot of us are obsessed with size, bigness, big car, big house, bigger TV screen. And yet, when you really think about it, isn't small good? Don't good things come in small packages? And what about the teacher-student ratio in small classes? What about that? Okay, so this was not in the study, but I thought you might be interested. In 2015-2016, the U.S. graduation rate was 83%. For the same year, 97.7% in our schools. And out of those, I don't have the right year there, but over 90% of the students in our schools who graduate plan to go to college the next year. They may not all plan to go to La Sierra University. It could be a junior college, a 2-year college or whatever, but they plan to go on to college. Okay, so this is data that Martin had, that he needed in order for the blueprint. Now, They increased in ability. Our students increased in ability. And I would like to remind you of a quotation from Ellen White, Education. She says, "It is the work of true education to train the youth to be thinkers." I'm going to translate that as ability, and not mere reflectors of other people's thoughts. I'm going to say that's achievement. All right, so are we accomplishing that in our schools? And I'm going to say yes. Here is a chart. The blue line is achievement. The red line is ability. The dotted line, well, not dotted, but whatever line at the bottom, is a national average. So also you see, the longer a child has been in our school system, the greater the increase in both ability and achievement. This is a very remarkable finding, one that the statisticians, I don't know, all I can use the word is remarkable. They weren't sure that that was happening. So one year they came to me and they said, "Hey, Elisa, you know, we got this finding, and maybe we're wrong, because ability doesn't usually increase the way it is in our schools." I said, "Well, what can we do?" And they said, "Well, we've got to run the data again." Now, mind you, running the data, you know, I don't know, I've forgotten how many items in the factor analysis. It was huge. But I said, well, if that's the only thing we can do, let's do it. So they ran the data again, and this is what they came out with again. Okay, so they hadn't made a mistake. All right, so now we're calling this the Adventist school effect. And as a result, people kept asking us, first parents, then other educators, excuse me. And when I went to national conferences, other parochial school districts like the Catholics, the Lutherans, would ask me, "Hey, how do you Adventists get that? How'd you get that?" And guess what I'd have to say to them? I have no idea. Well, I have an idea, but I don't have any, concrete proof or anything. So they'd say, why? So as a result, over the years, while we've been pondering the data and thinking about that question and disseminating the data, we came up with a new study. This is the newest initiative out of the center that I direct. Decision Genesis seeks to determine the why behind Adventist education's academic success as established by cognitive genesis. We propose that academic achievement and changes in ability can be explained to a large degree by a student's worldview, the way he or she processes information and makes decisions. How many of you were here last week? Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of slides that Danny, my husband, showed you just as a kind of a review. And they'll look totally different because he's got this black background and I don't know. All right, here it is. You remember this one? All right, this is a worldview model. And there's the chance line, the line running down the middle there, right? So most people are along that chance line. That is the me first, the rules first, and in between there, the mixed up. Well, I call them mixed up. I don't think they're calling it mixed up anymore, you guys? No. But, undecided. So that's a chance line, and they move across the chance line. But notice on this side, they have some similar characteristics. So those on this left side, pride, unproductive movement, and selfishness. That is, they can move along the line, but it's unproductive movement. On the other hand, the other side, here, I guess, does this work? Yeah. On this side, we have humility, growth, wisdom, and altruism. And the ideal is to move closer and closer to this corner for that worldview, the hope worldview. Okay? Any questions on this? No. Good. Because then I'd punt it over to my husband there. Or we do. All right, here's the second worldview. Now, in the worldview that we are wanting to test in Decision Genesis is the growth of students, okay? The worldview and growth. Is that me? Okay. It's moving up this way toward this 1-1 edge with hope and God. Growth, wisdom, humility. These people here are still moving along this line from here to here. Now, do you remember that he gave you an example of Scott Peck, the psychiatrist, in his book, A Different Drummer, I think? Was that the book? All right. Peck says, he's a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist. He says that, you know, he'll get some people, and after some successful therapy, they would move. They could, if they were mope, they could move down here toward rope, or vice versa. That's why this red line goes two ways. But while they might make some minor improvements in their, I don't know, psychological states, that really they were not making significant improvement because they were just moving back and forth here. Okay, it looked like some improvement, and it probably was, but it wasn't sufficient improvement. It wasn't sufficient to move them off of this line up this way. Okay, so we want to see, does in fact a worldview taught in our schools help our students in these areas here, particularly in growth? We have designed a worldview inventory, because we said, how are we going to test that exactly? There isn't a worldview inventory. So a group of us, I would say two psychologists, two statisticians, a neuroradiologist, okay, and myself, maybe a few other people, got together and we said, we need to design a test, develop a test. And so we're calling it the Worldview Inventory. After doing some preliminary testing, we realized that we needed the expertise of somebody who really knows something about test design, instrument design. And so through a number of connections that I have with some testing companies, I got to meet the developer or the author or the editor, I'm not sure how they, of the 5th edition of the Stanford-Binet intelligence test. Okay, how many of you know Stanford-Binet intelligence test? Okay. A lot of people have never heard of it before. All right, he's the author of the 5th edition, co-author of the 6th edition. And when I talked to, his name is Gail, when I talked to him and explained to him what we wanted to do, what we had already done, and I'll explain that in a minute, what we had already done, he said, I'm on board. I will help you. And he could help us determine, establish reliability, internal validity, all of those kinds of things. He could also help us with word readability, because we decided we needed an adult version of the WIN as well as a student version of the WIN. I don't know, Udo, am I missing anything about? Okay. This has been in the works a while. Let me see. No, I don't want to show you that yet. It's been in the works a while. Let me tell you how many people we tested initially on the adult. 1,400 people. That's a lot of people. Those of you in research, it's a lot of people. And let me tell you, at that time, the inventory was almost 200 items. Now tell me, who is going to take a test for you, volunteer, 200 items? I don't know how long it took them, at least 45 minutes or more, you know? But I'm thanking God. I am really grateful for those over 1,400 people who said, yes, we'll do it for you. And so we had 1,400. We did a factor analysis. Don't ask me to go into that. We can't today. But we did a factor analysis and identified that we were on the right track with the test. Udo's shaking his head so I can move on. Okay? Now, here are some of the items of the student test, okay? We can't read them all. If you've done Evelyn Wood's speed dynamic reading, you can read it. But I'm going to just pick out maybe 3. Number 1, I participate in activities that may make a difference in other people's lives. Remember, this is trying to determine their worldview. Number 4, I enjoy being reckless. Number 8, the best schools enforce their rules. Okay? So those are just a sampling of some of the items. By the way, the student test and the adult test now takes 15 minutes or less. All right, now here's a scenario. The scenarios are interesting. This is a student scenario. Your basketball team loses by 1 point, which you feel was the result of a poor call by the referee. You speak up, here are your choices, and you can do hardly, occasionally, frequently, most of the time. You speak up and protest that the loss is not fair. You refuse to accept the loss and vow to get revenge the next time you play. That seems like an understandable kind of approach, right? You tell the other team that they won by a bad call. You congratulate the other team and don't mention the bad call. You file a complaint against the referee. I guess that might happen in the NBA. On the surface, you accept the judgment, but later, among friends, you criticize the referee. So we have several age-appropriate scenarios for this student edition. Now, the new study that we have embarked upon just this fall, 2018, involves this. It involves Iowa. I have Iowa there. That's the achievement test we use. Standardized test used by taken by millions of students. Okay? The COGAT, which is the abilities test, also standardized, taken by not as many, because most people feel it's achievement that's important, not the ability. But if you don't have the two, it's a little bit difficult to say the achievement is above predicted or not, okay? And then the WIN, which is our inventory, the Worldview inventory, and that's equally our study, the newest initiative out of CRAE, the Center for Research on K-12 Adventist Education, Decision Genesis. And by the way, if you read your little blurb from Dave Larson, you would have noted that CRAE is the only center that focuses on K-12 Adventist education. All right, so I want to tell you, we wanted to kind of do a little pre-test of the student version of the WIN. And so we went to Loma Linda Academy and we tested 100 students on the student WIN. And these are the results that we got. Notice it's the most dominant to the least dominant factors. So you know a lot of the factors, me first, rules first, others first, and then combinations of those 3. Notice at Loma Linda, the most dominant factor among those academy students is others first. Next is rules. I'm just so glad rules was not number 1, the most dominant. We're making progress in that area, I think. So it's number 2 instead. And then here are the different configurations of the other factors through 7. Okay?
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, so I think I'm still doing all right. This fall, these are the entities that participated in the study. We had 35 schools. They had to be academies because we're testing 9, 10, and 11. They represented 11 conferences. We have 57 conferences in the North American division. They represented 4 unions. In next year, fall 2019, we hope we're going to have more, but we also know we are going to have more because some people, after we did this, committed to testing in 2019. So here are other applications of worldview inventory. One, people are saying to me, we want to get a cross-sectional view of students and teachers' worldviews in our schools. Can we model Jesus? Can we model the right worldview if we don't have the right worldview? As teachers, I'm saying, okay? So they want to see what's happening there. Others want to say, is there an evolution to worldviews over time? So that would be a longitudinal study. Now, some of you know that George Barna says by the age of 12 or 13, a child's worldview is established. Not firmly established, but they have a worldview. I often wondered why in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, you know the age of accountability for a Jewish young man is what? 12. It's 12. Okay, Jesus went to the temple at 12. They got their bar mitzvah and bar mitzvah at 12. And I think it was kind of interesting when I read Barna's research about worldview. All right, at LSU, just this year, this instructor is going to use the book that Danny wrote, Make Your Choices Better Than Chance. It's a course in which seniors are having to decide what kind of career they would like to have. And so they're using that as a capstone course. The Loma University Graduate Medical Education wants to know this. Is choice of subspecialty related to worldview? Now, I bet some of you might be a little bit interested in that, maybe. All right? I see someone smiling here. Okay. And we could say, well, just off the top of my head, I think it is. But it'd be nice to have the proof, right? So you use the WIN, the adult WIN. Some people want to know the distribution of Seventh-day Adventist Church members' worldview. Would the North American Division like to know that? And some people are saying yes. I have another one to add to this list, and that is, I can't tell you which school because they haven't decided yet, but it's a sister institution, not Loma Linda, not La Sierra, and not Pacific Union. So I get rid of it, okay? It's somewhere else. They want to use the book and the worldview inventory in their freshman seminar course across the university. So all freshmen taking that course are reading the same book, discussing the same thing, and then we do the repeat of the WIN later on. I'm not sure when. At the end of the year, next year, whatever. So those are some possibilities. I would welcome any ideas or suggestions that you have about how we could use the WIN and worldview. Okay.
Okay, time for questions.
I was so clear and so saying that nobody has any questions.
Okay,
Okay, Eddie, yes.
Thank you, Alicia, for an informative study. I was wondering if you have carried this through to the college level to show how our schools and colleges stack up against the Ivy Leagues and the other schools like UCLA and everything
I mean
else.
academically.
Academically, yeah.
No, I have not. And Eddie, some people have wanted us to do that, and I said I'm too old for it. Get a younger person to do that, okay? And you need to have money. Let me tell you, the Cognitive Genesis study took over $1 million for 4 years, $1 million. And mind you, none of it came from the church, NAD, nothing. That was all raised extramurally by people who really believed in Adventist education. But do you see how I said we don't want our results tainted by, oh yeah, you got money from the NAD, that's why the results turned out the way they did. So somebody'd have to raise the money to do that or something, but it hasn't been done, Eddie. Yes?
In the decision-making process, there were at least 3 factors mentioned here, at least 3 I got. That will be a decision made by partial truth, a decision made by emotions, and by reason. In our discussion, the word temperament was not used. Do you think, in your view, the temperament has any influence or part in the decision-making process?
Well, if we were to say temperament was more like emotion, I would say yes. But you know, all of these terms, there is a temperament test, by the way. There are several temperament tests. So I think it's a definition of the term, but I would say, and I'll ask Danny if he agrees, and Udo, that maybe temperament could be part of the emotion side there, as opposed to reason.
We had at one time thought about combining this test with personality test, looking at the big five. And for various reasons, we decided not to do that. But it's certainly a valid thing if we had the money and time to have a test that would do both of those things simultaneously.
Now, I didn't mention, I don't think, that there's ongoing research and testing of the WIN, because we want to test it in different populations, in different ages, to see the utility of the test ultimately. So it still has a lot more, there's still a lot more to the process to really establish external validity. Right now we have internal validity, but we want to establish eventually external validity.
Make a statement and then ask a question. One of the questions that I have in Dr. Kido's presentation last time, there's ways of thinking about the relationship between motion and reason. Some people have likened it to the reason being an engine and the feelings being the caboose or motion. Another way of looking at it, which I think is more accurate, is that emotions and reason are like yeast and bread, and once you get them mixed up together, you can't separate them. So that's a statement or opinion.
That's a good example too.
Yeah. So those illustrations you gave of how would students relate to the referee, those seem like they're more in the realm of attitudes and values that can't be, are difficult to separate emotion and reason from those things. It's a very real thing. So I guess it is a worldview inventory built on emotions and reason as two dichotomous variables, or it looks like it's more looking at attitudes and values. I don't know if that, I'm being clear.
Can you go back to the previous one?
Let's see, what did I do?
One more. I think when you look at...
Is this the one you want to look at?
Yeah, that's the one. I think when you start looking at those combinations, that's what you're probably referring to. And when we talk later on, I can show you what you're probably talking about within that diagram. And there's a conceptual framework for what you're talking about, I think. But I think it's a very important thing. And that's why we had talked so long about what is the relationship between this and the big five. And so I think some of the external validation will be to look at some of this relationship to various factors that are part of the big five inventory on personality.
I appreciated your talk very much, and the results are outstanding. I guess the question I would have is, it sounded like your comparison was with the public school system, is that correct?
It's with the...
National average,
It was
or-
national, including public schools, private schools, parochial schools, all the schools that took those same tests, standardized tests.
Have you looked at other, say, the Catholic school system or the Lutheran school system and Methodist system? How do they, are they also higher than the national average, and are they higher than us, or are we higher than them?
Well, I can't say at this moment. I can say your question is a question that has come up innumerable times. And I don't want to offend you, but I'm going to say this. They're mostly saying, how do we compare against the Catholics? And I say to them, why are the Catholics our gold standard? That's what I say to them. Now here, we cannot compare ourselves because of this. First of all, Catholics do not across the board do the cognitive abilities test. They only do, some of them may, some of them may not. Their admissions is very selective. My nephew went to a Jesuit school up in the Bay Area. He had to score on their test above 95% to get into that school on a test of their own. So you see, it's not comparing apples and oranges. And so we're unable to do that. And also the other thing is, Catholics have a curriculum by diocese. They do not, here's the thing why we could do this test. We have a standardized curriculum. Catholics do not. Every diocese, the educators can choose their own textbooks, design their own curriculum. So we couldn't do apples and apples and apples. But, well, what can I say? We can't do that. So I've never been able to satisfactorily answer that question because we don't have the data to do that. Right here. Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you for your research. I got a comment and a question. I think one of the reasons you didn't get amens from the audience is because they were in awe and speechless.
Well, okay, I'll take that.
But how do you think one might, or the church, might translate these distinguished outcomes into higher ed success, since we've heard some comments in prior presentations about some of the struggling experiences of Adventist higher education?
I think that's a complex question, and I think answers are hard to come by. I was part of that summit in July, the Summit on Higher Education, the Future of Higher Education, and they had a hard time answering. I mean, where are we going in higher ed? But getting back more to your question, I'd like you to know that many of the students we are accepting across the board in every one of our colleges and universities, 1, are not Adventists. Okay, 2, they have not had Adventist education. So when you mix that all up, it's very hard to say, to answer definitively. Right now, academies are going out to China and recruiting kids for their schools. I'm talking academies. Parents in China are willing to send their kids here to get an American high school degree, because that's going to open up so many doors for their kids, for their higher ed, okay? So we're mixing up, you see, our populations are getting diluted in a sense that when they go on to college, I don't know. Oh, another question back here.
I had a question similar to about asking about other parochial schools, but my question is about worldview. If it is the worldview, and other parochial schools are teaching the same worldview, I wanted to know if that produced the same results. Is a God view, other view that we're teaching common among other evangelicals, and if that is the reason, and if it's not, then can you isolate what could be the reason?
First of all, I haven't done research on other school systems, private parochial schools, what their take is on worldview. Okay? Yes, we're all Christian. Yes, we all believe in the 10 Commandments, etc., etc. But are we more rules-oriented? Are we when our kids are in school every day, are they seeing Christ reflected in their surroundings, in their teachers, etc.? I don't know. Somebody's got to do that research. Yes?
Just a one follow-up question. In the psychology of religion field, as you probably know, there's a vast amount of research on does faith make a difference in a whole bunch of behaviors, and church attendance is one of the strongest variables in terms of positive outcomes. And probably because it measures a lot of things. Like I would say these young people in Adventist schools are probably going to Pathfinders. They're probably having adults who they're mixing with more than people in the general population. They're likely, their parents have more of a social support network.
I agree, yes.
Would all of those things factor in to influencing a worldview?
I'm sure that they would. I'm sure that they would. Just as they factored into academic achievement. For instance, I didn't have time to explore every, but you know, schools that said, my pastor or our pastor is active in our school, and they gave him an excellent to good rating, those schools had higher achievement. And the pastors would come to me and said, I'm not doing anything. Well, how did I affect it? Well, I'm not so sure. When we asked principals, they said, oh, this pastor, he's kind of young, so he plays basketball during recess with the kids. Another one comes and eats in the cafeteria with them. Another one prays. One principal said, oh, before he leaves, he prays with the students. And so those are intangibles in terms of measuring, right, quantitatively. But qualitatively, we can identify those characteristics.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry. Oh, I have one last slide.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
you're fine.
Okay, one last slide. Okay. This is a quote from George Akers from the Journal of Adventist Theological Society, 1993. He says, the overarching purpose of our schools, the macro effect, when it's all said and done, is to give our youth a Christian worldview, to see everything from God's point of view, as revealed in His inspired word. It's giving our students a Christian mind, teaching them how to think Christian. I am saying we have never tried to determine that. And if we aren't doing that, well, there are two paths we could take. Improve, right? Or close up fold up our tents and go away, because let me tell you, if you're only interested in academic achievement, you can go somewhere else to get something very good. But if it's this, and I say, I agree with Akers, it's this, then we ought to figure out some way of determining how well are we doing in this area and how could we change or improve.
Okay, thank you for everything. Thank you very much, Dr. Kido. You have to understand that among North American Anglos, we're called the frozen chosen. So we don't raise our hand and say hallelujah. I went to a church here in the Redlands area. Roger knows who I'm talking about, BJ. And I said, it's a Pentecostal church. I said, do you raise your hand there? He said, that's the least thing we do. But anyway, appreciate your presentation to us. Remember the folks at the Paradise and, of course, the other places in California as well. And there was that link. I know they don't want clothes sent, but cash, credit cards, gift cards. So anyway, let's continue to remember them. I'm sorry to say.
Randy said RVs and motorhomes.
Okay, all right, RVs. Well, I understand that the Chico Church is doing a lot to help up there. All the pastors, I guess, in the Paradise area lost their homes, and I think that's a number of the academy teachers as well. So it's had quite an impact. At this time, let's say our benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Remember, next week, Dr. Tonstead will be here for a presentation.